This podcast is brought to you by Nuveen and Ruffer. Nuveen has provided investment excellence for 125 years. With expertise across income and alternatives, Nuveen continues to expand its capabilities while maintaining its legacy as a leading investment manager. Visit nuveen.com to learn more. Investing involves risk, loss of principal is possible. Ruffer is a London-based asset manager founded in 1994, managing over $25 billion for institutions, pension funds, charities, and individuals. They have a single investment approach that aims to deliver positive returns across the full range of market conditions. Investing involves risk, loss of principal is possible. Our next guest started her career as a sports journalist and found her voice in the most elite of locker rooms. Hear how she pivoted from this to serving athletes in a financial advisory capacity and the unique challenges that this cohort poses. I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to the 50 Faces podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by Anna McDonald, who has a dual role at Moneta, a St. Louis-based RIA with over $32 billion in assets under management. She supports athletes in all aspects of their financial lives, preparing them for sustained success beyond their athletic careers. Knowing this segment well, as she previously spent 6 years as an ESPN reporter, covering Major League Baseball and the National Football League. She was a spokesperson around health and safety concerns in the NFL. In addition to her work with athletes, she also serves as Moneta's Director of Family Learning. In this capacity, she works with Moneta's client-facing teams to facilitate learning programs for families to transfer wealth to younger generations. Welcome, Anna. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited we're in person together.
We are in person.
What a treat.
In person in sunny St. Louis.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Well, let's start with your background and career journey. Could you talk about where you grew up, your early interests, and how you became interested in journalism and sports in particular?
Sure. So growing up in St. Louis, it's just such a sports town. So much of my family, much of our culture was playing sports. My family was very encouraging in anything we wanted to do, from grandparents to my mom and dad. So just kind of deciding what direction in life I wanted to go in. I just kind of knew anything that I put my mind to, I'd have their support and be able to do it. So that's kind of how I grew up. When my kids were little, I really enjoyed interviewing athletes. I figured that out really quickly, from football to baseball, any topic. It was something I was able to do well while also having little kids around. I wrote for blogs and various websites, but I realized very quickly that there were no female reporters and hardly any male reporters asking player about advanced statistic in sports. At the time, you had these people in front offices really into sabermetrics, and that's kind of the advanced statistics about the game. So no one was actually asking the people who played baseball what they thought about how decisions were being made based on collected information the advanced stats were showing teams. So that's really how I got into the door with journalism.
So the Moneyball kind of way of thinking, this data, stats, that wasn't really there was no feedback loop really on that. And so that's what's fun. And I suppose, how did that feel as a woman in a bit of a man's world? I mean, it's changing a little bit now with more female coaches at high level. But how did you penetrate that club room or that locker room, so to speak?
Yeah, so all the players, athletes were always just fantastic. The thing that from a female side, I learned really quickly that I had to prove that I knew what I was talking about. So just thinking about the advanced stats. When I was starting out on this was well before the teams were asking players what they thought about it. So you'd have the old school, baseball guys who were having a donut and downing a beer, and then the merging of the stats guys in the offices trying to tell them how to play the game. And so it was really fun time to kind of do some great new just words and work in the baseball world, trying to get the two minds together.
Would you say you fall anywhere on either side of what maybe used to be a divide, but maybe now is a marriage in terms of the stats and it's all in the person? It's a kind of a look and feel type of an approach for talent spotting?
Yeah, personally, I still always lean more to the eye and what scouts can do, and just knowing the baseball player or the football player as a person. But I do know that those statistics, they help teams get an edge on the field. In most sports, the talent, when it's professional, is very similar between teams. So as a team, you're asking yourself, how am I going to find an advantage against the opposing team? And statistics are a great way to do that when you have such equal talent kind of across the board.
And what are some of the highs and lows of that career? Because clearly this sounds like an absolute dream job for so many aspiring journalists or even just a sports fan to be interacting with some of the greats. Any anecdotes or really memorable high or low points?
Yeah, I think I learned that I always had to come really prepared for interviews. I had an exact formula for a topic that I felt would reach a national audience. The approach with ESPN was really different than what some of the local reporters were doing. And so I had a formula that I used, I created, and it worked really well. I had to work hard. No one in Major League Baseball makes it easy for a reporter. The NFL, football, they roll out the red carpet for you. You feel like special. You feel like you've walked into this great place. But baseball, I'm in tunnels, walking around boxes of nachos, cases of beer, trying to figure out where I need to be and just hoping that I don't hit the wrong door or talk to the wrong person. So I learned really, really quickly that I needed to establish the right way to interview. And there's a really great example of this. It sticks out so much in my mind. I had said to my editor at ESPN, I said, could we please do an article on Paul Goldschmidt? He's an Arizona baseball player. At that point, he was not getting national attention. He's now with the St. Louis Cardinals. I had to pitch this hard. I basically said, trust me, this guy is good. Like, we really need to run something on him. And they're like, fine, whatever. Just, we know you, just do it, have fun. So I was really excited to interview him. And the first few questions were not going great. Like, it was just awful. And he kept giving me one-word answers. And so I was kind of frustrated because I was really excited about this. And finally, in frustration, I said, when a slider hits the lower left side of the zone, what adjustments do you have to make with your bat? And this question was based on some of the advanced stats that I knew about him. And he got really quiet. And I thought, oh gosh, they're going to kick me out of the locker room. What's going on? And he just smiled and he said, okay, let's do this interview now. And then the rest of it was great. So I proved that I kind of respected him. I put in the time. And so that was one thing that I really learned that really allowed me to see some great success in that area. And after that article was published, I had writers from all over the country reaching out to me saying, Anna, how did you get him to talk? How did you get him to talk? So yeah, it was a lot of learning of, just how to use that time wisely.
It's interesting. I guess you really earned his respect by having that bit of technical knowledge and being genuinely interested in it, and not just sort of talking to having, I suppose, those pat questions, the boilerplate questions. Any low points? I would imagine it's quite a high pressure organization. Journalism itself, sports is high pressure. Journalism itself has seen its pressures. Anything that you remember that maybe you learned the lessons from?
Yeah, I think it was kind of hard in baseball, again, just the navigating it all, where to be. I want to be respectful of people, and that's a lot of who I am. And so I always was very conscientious of not wanting to make a wrong decision. So I think the biggest thing is just navigating yourself in and out of the locker rooms and on the field and in the dugout and making sure you're on time and respectful. Again, the players, and at this day and age, everyone is just fantastic and respectful. I kind of, even more than the hard parts, I had some great experiences. I talked to people from Mike Trout to Mariano Rivera to Steven Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. I was tackled by Alex Rodriguez and Derek Jeter. Obviously, they didn't mean to, but it was in the locker room. I cried with David Freese. My greatest memories, one that's really close to my heart, is I had this beautiful conversation on this summer day in the shade in the dugout with Jose Fernandez. And he had tragically passed away 2 weeks after I talked to him. And we just talked about, he made his way from Cuba and he was just extremely talented in baseball. And the things we talked about, some of it will never be public, but it was a beautiful conversation. And I just think of all the conversations like that I just treasured time and time again. And so even though there were things that were hard and, I was constantly learning and constantly being challenged, there was so much that outweighed that, so much good.
And I think what I'm really hearing is that you got to see the human behind the sports persona. And I think that relates a lot to what we do at Moneta in terms of finding the human behind that client opportunity and really working with the human in all their strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, many strengths in the case of athletes. So maybe just transitioning from that into our practice here, what would you say you took from that? And what do you see as being maybe that gap that athletes need in terms of their financial lives?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. As I look back on it now, I think while there was a really distinct transition, slowly to the end of my time with ESPN, I was seeing that there were these kind of holes that athletes weren't being protected in. And I distinctly remember there was one day, and I won't say the guy's name, but he had just come up. He was promoted to the major leagues. And that's a big deal. And he was just kind of wandering around looking lost. And I said to him, I said, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? And he was just so upset. He said, I don't know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like, well, it's picture day. I'll take you to where you need to go. And one of the other players, Lance Lynn, he came over and he's like, just don't make eye contact with anyone in the stands, keep walking. So we kind of spent this time talking to him about what to do, and I showed him where to go. And what this is getting to is I started slowly realizing there is a huge hole here where athletes have a lot of pressures and stresses on them that nobody is really helping them out. I thought, what am I? I'm just a reporter. How in the heck am I the one helping this guy show him where he needs to be? Like, this is ridiculous. There has to be somebody that can help athletes take some of these, you wouldn't think it's a pressure, but when you think about, again, that even talent across teams and all sports, if there's any edge you can get, take it. And so the pressure of maybe making sure your bills are paid or questions that you have that you don't know who to ask, where maybe the agents, they're not able to kind of answer all the questions that these guys have. So I was really seeing a hole. So that was a very distinct turning point in my career there. And I really became to develop this passion for wanting to help them. At the same time, personally, my father-in-law developed Alzheimer's, and we have a very complicated family business with cousins and aunts and uncles, and things fell through the cracks at no fault to his own because of his capacity. And it was really devastating for us. And I said to my friend, I said, there's got to be a place that overlooks everything from the taxes to the investments to the estate planning. Like, there's got to be somebody who's watching over everything. And that led me to Moneta. And it was a great merging of my passion for wanting to help athletes, but also my passion for making sure that somebody's life, the entirety of it, is taken care of rather just than the investing piece.
We're going to take a short break to hear from one of the sponsors of this series, Ruffer, a London-based asset manager founded in 1994, which manages over $25 billion for institutions, pension funds, charities, and individuals. I sat down with Jasmine Yo, fund manager, and asked her about the global macro-driven absolute return approach that Ruffer has. And you say that your approach is deliberately different. How is it deliberately different?
We're regret minimizers rather than return maximizers. That's really what makes us unique. When constructing our portfolio, we start with the potential market dangers and vulnerabilities we see. So for us, the focus is on avoiding permanent capital loss, and that's the starting point for the strategy. And really that contrasts a conventional approach where the starting point is often risk as opportunity, and then hedging or protection is really a secondary overlay. I think we're also different in that our focus is forward-looking rather than relying on backward-looking correlations and data. So we think with a sufficient understanding and appreciation of history, markets, fundamentals, we can form a pretty good idea of the prospective risks. And probably the final thing is the fact that the strategy is completely unconstrained. So we're very much an own anything, go anywhere type of investor. And given each major market drawdown over the past 3 decades has presented unique challenges, that flexibility has been key.
And now back to the show. And that, of course, is how the entire financial planning practice is evolving, is around this holistic approach, this life coach, this life planning. And certainly I've witnessed that even in the last 3 years, the development of that. So looking now at the athlete as client or as partner and how you think about that in the financial planning practice, what are some of the maybe unique characteristics that you might need to think about when working with that segment?
Yeah, so when I first started, I contacted one of the Major League Baseball agents that I knew really well out of New York, and I just told him what I was doing. And he said, Anna, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I have never seen the balance of the 32 billion in AUM that you have with you guys being in the weeds of knowing everything about their lives. And that's really the crux of what it is that I'm really passionate about what we're doing, because our athletes, a lot of people that work with athletes, they just focus on only athletes. But what we're doing, our athletes get the benefit of, we also have family office clients who are great business people or have really strong families. And so they get the deep bench of that knowledge base. So it's kind of tapping into some of those other resources that very successful people have. And so it's a really unique opportunity. Working with athletes, we have 2 things. It's learning We're not just doing things for them. We're not just paying bills and not telling them. We're teaching them. Just this week, we had a 2-hour conversation about the time frame of investing and compound interest. And so our athletes are committed to learning these skills so that they know what's going in and out of their bank accounts, so that nobody can take advantage of them. It's a lot of training.
I'm thinking probably of the profile of the way an athlete's wealth is built. It's not a J curve. Whereas if you're a business owner, you're investing, you're probably living some very lean years and seeing the payoff later. I'm not sure what the opposite to a J curve. There's probably some technical term, but I would think an athlete has a lot of their high earning years early on in their lives. And they need to therefore, I suppose, sow the seeds there in order to be able to still harvest later when they're perhaps less active in their careers.
Yeah, in our initial conversation with athletes, and this is something I'm really passionate about, we talked to them about our goal is so that when you're retired, because there's such a short time to make money, that you can do whatever you want. You don't have to work. So our goal is really protecting their best interest no matter what. That's all we care about is what is best for them. And so a lot of conversations deal around cash flow, spending, and budgeting. Even if you're making $20 million a year, you still need a budget. The more that they're able to pull back and save, the greater assets they have down the road. And that's a huge part of what we do.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the advantage of having a diversified client base. I think of that as being certainly good for the firm. But when you think about it, it's actually good for the client too, because some of these athletes, particularly those that were successful early, have probably lived a life that is not necessarily very real. They've been on the celebrity circuit, the red carpet you mentioned. They've lived a charmed life, perhaps disconnected from reality. So to have that reality check through us, through our other clients, through that peer knowledge is probably actually extremely valuable.
Yeah, and that's really the learning piece. I get phone calls and text 24/7. There's really nothing that stops us from helping an athlete out. This week, I coordinated 2 opposing teams getting together to help out one of our clients. He needed the home team to help as a visitor, and thanks to the kindness of the other team, we were able to get it done. I've had phone calls about waitresses taking credit cards, what plastic to use for slip and slide parties, questions about how to deposit cash, how to write a check, how to deposit a check. And the biggest one I get all the time is, how can I get $30,000 immediately in Vegas? So I love that we have an openness, that we really want our clients to feel comfortable asking us anything. Again, it's a learning piece. As they ask questions, they're learning, they're understanding their life. And hopefully what we do for them is taking the pressure off of all those things that can cause stress. I mean, it's stressful if a waitress grabs your credit card and you get home and you realize she has it and it was just a kind of a bad situation. So I don't love it when an athlete calls me on game day when we have a game and they have a big issue. But what I do love is being able to say, don't worry about it. We will take care of it. You just focus on playing the game and win the game, and we've got the rest. I love being able to do that for them.
And what do you think of some of these, speaking of some unreal and Vegas withdrawals, etc., which is definitely not a reality for many people. What do you think of some of the celebrity athletes, whether it be Serena Williams or A-Rod, who have their venture funds and they've actually become celebrity investors?
Yeah, so I really think that they deserve, if they're putting their effort to making a second phase in life, they deserve whatever they can make of it. It's such a hard transition after retirement. I mean, being a professional athlete, they're so hyper-focused. They just spend so much time. And it's not, I think we think of it as it's just this luxury lifestyle. I mean, there's still times where they have to go over to their parents' basement and get water out of the basement for them, or load up their pickup trucks and drive across the country with all their stuff because they've been traded, or when families are involved. So it just, thinking about Alex Rodriguez, he put in the time. He worked hard. It didn't just happen. And so if he or anyone, I think this is probably a really different perspective, but if they feel like they can make an impact in the world in the second phase of life, I would fully support them and use all that hard work, all those sleepless nights, all that travel. It's so hard on relationships. It's so hard on marriages. Use all of that you've worked and make it whatever you want. I would support them. And if they can use their name to do what they want to, I'm all for it.
And one last question before we move to talk about education more broadly. So I'm just thinking of some of those athletes who have left it all on the field. They're used to highly charged environments. They're used to volatility. They're used to the highs and lows of winning and losing. And we know that that can have a strain sometimes on their personal lives. We see a lot of stories about the stress that you mentioned that they're under. How does that translate into you encouraging them to have restraint around things like that $30,000 in Vegas, or around some of these celebrity adventures, perhaps, some of which are less good than others?
Sure.
Do you find you have to step in more with this client, maybe because of their stage in life, than you would with others?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is it only works when there's a trust relationship. So we are very honest about who we are as people and about the fact that we care about our clients. It works really well at Moneta because the only thing that matters to us is their best interest. I'm not taking commissions. I'm not getting anything from anything I do. It's really the decision is what is in their best interest. So the first dynamic is really establishing trust. And then the second dynamic is having the hard conversations. And there's been a lot of hard conversations that I've had, but there's nothing more rewarding than when you have that baseline of trust and you can speak to something in their lives where maybe they need to kind of do a U-turn and rethink. It's just really wonderful and a privilege to be in that position. And it's something that I don't think, if an athlete does not have that in their lives, it's going to make everything harder.
So let's move now to education more broadly, because I know that's part of your dual role at Moneta. You speak in particular about education around wealth transfers and succession and educating the next generation. Can you tell us a little bit about your curriculum you cover there and how it's been received?
Yeah, so we are just so excited to be able to have this to offer our clients. You and I have talked about this before, and it's very common. We know this at our firm, that it's so much more difficult to preserve the family and those relationships in the family than the wealth itself. It's not the size of the family's wealth that's going to determine the ability for a family to thrive and live on. It's really realizing that you have something as a family that's special to each and every person in that family, and putting the time and effort towards maintaining that, talking about your values, talking about your mission statements, getting cousins together, getting siblings together, wanting to make sure that they're heard, that they have a voice in the family. So all those things, we can have the estates tied up, taxes are taken care of, the investment portion is taken care of. But if there aren't conversations about just the family and who you are and what you want to be, it's really hard to maintain the character of the family throughout several generations. So that's what we're really working on and what we're really excited about.
It's amazing how little we speak about values. It's something we just almost presume that everyone knows about us. But I think especially with families and being more scattered today, it's really important. Do you find that any topics come up time and time again? Is it financial literacy? Is it concern around capital preservation, or any themes that you're hearing?
When you think about what are on the minds of ultra high net worth families and the next generation, most are really their place in the family when they transition from business or when that takes place. So that's a huge topic. And really, the second biggest thing that we're seeing and working with is that stage of going off to college, because that is a missed opportunity that so many families don't utilize, is that college is expensive. All of a sudden, well, how did we get here? How is our family able to pay for college when somebody else might not be able to? So there's an opportunity to tell about your family story. Maybe the parents or the grandparents put in some hard work to get where they are today. Maybe they sacrificed. My daughter asked the question once, she's like, what are we doing with paying for college? And I said, do you remember that really tiny house that you hated and that bedroom that was small and we were all pretty miserable? So we made the choice at that point in our life to put money away for your college rather than buy a bigger house to keep up with the neighbors and everybody else that we lived around. And so we really see a lot. The entry point for a lot of the family learning is going off to college and graduating high school. There's so many opportunities for discussion, talking about family values. So that's really an area that we have seen a lot of great conversations come from.
And you find the families are making the time, and their college kids are making the time, and that's great.
Yeah. And by the time, my high schoolers, I can tell them what I think my values are, but at that point, they really don't want to hear. My forming who my child is really happened when they were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. And high school, I just try to steer them in the right path. But college, they're actually really interested in those conversations. They become curious. They're creating who they are and their place in the world. So it's an ideal time for those conversations.
Fantastic. I'd love to go back to your personal story now. Looking back at the many careers you've had and the journalism, particularly now transitioning into financial planning and education, were there any particular setbacks or learning experiences that came from them that you can share?
I think I always, I look at people and I'm like, oh, they've had the same career path their entire lives. That is, I never had that. So I think my biggest setback was always myself, just trying to put myself in, maybe wishing I would have had the same career path throughout life. But it's kind of crazy how all of the experiences really led me to this point, and I couldn't be more happy and excited for what's going on. We had kind of talked about people that have influenced me. There's so many people in journalism that I built relationships, Scott Price, Rob Nair, Tim Layden, Joe Strauss, David Schoenfeld, Christina Carl, Roger Goodell and his wife, Brian McCarthy in the NHL, Mike Matheny, John Mozeliak, John Daniels, Justin Hollander, the entire crew at ESPN. If I had good content, they would promote it. And so I think about my greatest setback was me always trying to look at what other reporters were doing, or even now in this industry, I look at people at Moneta, I'm like, oh, they've been doing this for 20 years and I'm kind of new here. So, I just think being so thankful for all those people that I learned from that took the time. I think of Justin Hollander in the front office who would always give me background information if I had a question about something regarding baseball, and just so thankful for all the people I came across.
That's great. Well, it's great to recognize those gestures, because I think sometimes these are the unsung heroes of our career, the people who help us out. And it's nice to recognize that and to list these names here. Looking back, and you probably worked with some legends. I know many people have the Michael Jordan poster on their wall and are listening to his mottos and creeds every day and implementing them. Is there any creed or motto that you have either learned from them or developed on your own that you can leave us with?
Yeah, so everybody always laughs. I have no pictures of me with any athlete. I've talked to some of the greatest people to ever play professional sports. Nobody knows who our athletes are now because we don't give out that information. And so I have nothing to show. But again, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want to help them. And I distinctly remember something that has enabled and made my motto for who I am today was Mike Matheny. He was the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. He was also a fantastic person, just a baseball player. And I remember there was one time in the dugout we were interviewing, and he said, I firmly believe that if you do the right thing and if you're kind to people, if you show them respect, that will come back to you in a positive way. And that's not really groundbreaking, but I think for me, because I always want to help people, I would always do that. I would always try to be helpful and try to do the right thing. But the point that I was missing was I was forgetting to expect great things. And so really my motto, it's kind of morphed from, again, do the right thing, be respectful of people, but also expect great things to come, work really hard, and be thankful for when that happens. And it really changed my outlook at life. It changed me from constantly looking at what other people are doing, whether it's a reporter or somebody else in the business, taking my eyes off of them and focusing on being thankful for what's in front of me. And that really changed.
Well, it's a great philosophy, and it aligns very much, I'm sure, with your client base. I mean, we're all inclined to take that shot now, thanks to the warning that we always miss the shots we don't take. So I think that's a nice reminder of being optimistic, which of course every athlete has to be, thinking about the long game, which I think your team does, and being that coach behind the scenes. It may not always get the glory, but everybody, when I ask any athlete, I've had some athletes on this podcast, what do they remember most? What creed or motto? They will always come back to their coach. So know that the role you play is critical for them. So thank you so much, Anna, for coming here and sharing your insights from the many aspects of your journey with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm Aoife Devitt. Thank you for listening to the 50 Faces podcast. If you liked what you heard and would like to tune in to hear from more inspiring professionals and their personal journeys, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organisations and affiliations of the host or any guest.